You have heard it your whole life. Renting is throwing money away. Buying a house is the smart, grown-up thing to do. It builds wealth. It builds equity. And renting? That is just paying your landlord's mortgage. It sounds obvious. It sounds like plain common sense. And it is one of the most expensive pieces of common sense you will ever believe. It has quietly pushed people into homes they could not afford and scared others out of building wealth for years. Because the truth is, renting is not automatically a waste, and buying is not automatically smart. Whether a house makes you richer or quietly drains you comes down to three numbers that most people never run. In the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly what those numbers are, when buying really is the better move, and when renting and investing the difference quietly wins. Let us break the myth. Quick note before we start. This is general education, not personal financial advice. Housing depends on your city, your life, and your plans, so I am going to give you the math and the framework, and you run your own numbers. Here is the myth in one sentence. Rent money disappears. Mortgage money builds equity. Therefore, buying always wins. It feels airtight, but it hides three things: the costs of owning that also disappear, the value of what renting actually buys you, and the opportunity cost of the money you sink into a home. Fix those three blind spots, and the whole picture changes. So here's the plan. First, the hidden costs of buying that vanish just like rent. Then what renting actually gives you. Then the numbers that truly decide it. And finally, when buying genuinely is the smarter move, because sometimes it absolutely is. Let us start with the part nobody wants to hear. The first crack in the myth is this. People believe that every dollar a homeowner pays builds equity. It does not. A huge chunk of it vanishes just like rent. It just vanishes more quietly. Start with mortgage interest. In the early years of a typical 30-year mortgage, most of your monthly payment goes to interest, not to the loan itself. In year one, you might put the majority of every single payment straight into the bank's pocket, and only a small slice into actual ownership. That interest is gone. It builds you nothing. It is rent, just paid to a bank instead of a landlord. Then property taxes, every year, forever, even after the mortgage is fully paid off. Gone. Then homeowner's insurance. Gone. Then maintenance. And this is the one people always forget. A rough rule is that a home costs about 1% of its value every year just to maintain. On a $300,000 home, that is around $3,000 a year on average for roofs, water heaters, plumbing, all the things that quietly break. None of that builds equity either. And on top of all of it, you pay closing costs to buy, often thousands of dollars. And when you sell, real estate commissions can eat around 5 to 6% of the wholesale price. And there are two more costs that catch people off guard. If you put down less than 20%, you usually pay private mortgage insurance, an extra monthly charge that protects the bank, not you, and builds you zero equity. And if you buy a condo or a home in many neighborhoods, there are homeowners association fees, often hundreds of dollars a month, every month, that also just vanish into thin air. So before we compare anything, sit with this. Owning has its own giant pile of money that disappears every single month. The honest comparison was never rent versus a mortgage payment. It is rent versus the part of ownership that also vanishes. And that pile is far bigger than almost anyone expects. So if buying also burns a mountain of money, why does everyone treat renting like the only waste? Because of what we cannot see on a spreadsheet. Which brings us to what renting actually buys you. The second crack in the myth is thinking renting gives you nothing in return. It gives you three things that have real financial value. They are just invisible when you only look at the rent number. First, flexibility. If a better job opens up in another city, you can take it. A renter gives 30 days notice and goes. An owner has to sell, pay the commissions, and pray the market cooperates on their timeline. That freedom to move toward opportunity is worth real money over a whole career. Second, a capped cost. Your rent is the most you pay that month. When the water heater dies, that is your landlord's $4,000 problem, not yours. As an owner, your mortgage is the least you pay. Everything on top of it, The repairs, the surprises, the special assessments, all of that is yours. Third, renting frees up your cash. A down payment is often tens of thousands of dollars locked into a single, illiquid asset you cannot touch. As a renter, that same money can stay invested, working for you, and reachable if an emergency hits. Now, none of this means renting is always better. It means renting is not throwing money away. You are buying flexibility, a ceiling on your costs, and liquidity. Those are not nothing. For a lot of people, at a lot of moments in life, those are exactly the right things to buy. Okay, so both sides cost money, and both sides give you something back. How do you actually decide? With numbers, not slogans. And the first number is the price to rent ratio. Here is how it works, and it takes 10 seconds. Take the price of a home you would actually buy. Divide it by the annual rent for a similar place. So, a $300,000 home versus renting something similar for $1,500 a month, which is $18,000 a year. $300,000 divided by $18,000 is about 16. That is your ratio. As a rough guide, a ratio under about 15 tends to favor buying. A ratio over about 21 tends to favor renting because homes there are expensive relative to what it simply costs to rent them. Between 15 and 20, it is a genuine toss-up that depends on the other numbers. This one ratio quietly explains something that confuses people. Why buying is often smart in a cheaper city and often a trap in an expensive one. Same person, same salary, completely different right answer. And it has nothing to do with being responsible or irresponsible. It is about the ratio. So the first thing you do, before any emotion, is find that number for where you live. And to see how much it matters, picture two friends. One lives in an affordable city where a decent house costs $200,000, and a similar rental runs about $1,300 a month. Her ratio is around 13, comfortably in by territory, so for her, owning probably builds wealth. The other lives in an expensive coastal city where the same lifestyle costs $800,000 to buy, but only about $2,500 a month to rent. His ratio is over 26, deep in rent territory. If he stretches to buy anyway, just to feel responsible, he is very likely making the worse financial move, not the better one. Same decision, opposite answers, and the only thing that changed was one little number. The second number is time. Specifically, how long you are actually going to stay. Remember those transaction costs, the closing costs to get in and the 5 to 6% to get out? Those are so large that buying almost never pays off in the short term. There is a break-even point, often somewhere around 5 years, though it swings a lot by market, where you have finally owned long enough for appreciation and equity to outrun everything you spent buying and selling. Stay past the break-even, and buying starts to win. Sell before it, and you can easily lose money on a home even in a rising market, because the fees quietly ate your gains. This is exactly why buying a house you might leave in 2 or 3 years is one of those money mistakes people make with the very best intentions. They think they are being responsible adults. The math says they would have been better off renting and keeping their cash free. So before you buy, the honest question is not, can I qualify for a mortgage? It is, am I truly going to stay here long enough to get past the break-even? And if your honest answer is, I am not sure, then that uncertainty itself has a price, and renting is often how you buy your way out of it. There is one more belief propping up this whole myth, and it might be the biggest one. People assume a home always goes up, and up by a lot. Prices on the news feel like they only ever climb. But zoom out. Over the long run, after you strip out inflation, the average home has historically appreciated only a little, often somewhere around 1% a year in real terms. Not the double-digit jumps that make headlines in a hot couple of years, but a slow, modest climb spread across decades. Meanwhile, the broad stock market has historically returned much more over those same long stretches. So the picture in people's heads that a house is a rocket ship of wealth is mostly a story. A home is usually a place to live that roughly holds its value against inflation, plus that forced savings we will talk about in a minute. It is not a magic money machine. And the moment you stop expecting it to be one, the honest comparison with renting and investing gets a whole lot closer than the myth ever admits. The third number, and the one almost nobody runs, is opportunity cost. And this is where renting versus buying connects to everything else on this channel. When you buy, you lock up a big down payment, and very often you pay a few $100s more per month than you would to rent a similar place. So the real question is, what would all that money do somewhere else? Picture it. Buying ties up a $40,000 down payment, plus, say, a few $100s a month more than renting would cost. Now imagine a renter takes that same $40,000 and that same monthly difference and steadily invests it in a simple, broad index fund. At a conservative long-run illustration, over 10 or 20 years, that can grow into a genuinely large number. And as always, past performance never guarantees the future, so treat this as a model, not a promise. Let me make it concrete. Imagine two people with the exact same housing budget over 7 years. One buys, sinks in the down payment, and pays the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, and the maintenance. The other rents a similar place for a little less, invests that $40,000 up front, and invests the monthly difference every single month. When you actually run those two lives forward, the renter who invests is very often not behind at all. In plenty of markets, they come out ahead, holding a big, liquid investment account, while the owner holds a house plus a pile of interest and fees they will never see again. Same income, same 7 years, and the quiet, boring renter quietly won. But it is a real trade-off. The homeowner is betting everything on one house, on one street, in one town. The renter who invests the difference is betting on the entire market. And do not skip past that word, betting. A house is not just an investment, it is an undiversified one. It is one property, on one street, tied to one local job market. If that town declines, or the neighborhood changes, or the roof and the market turn against you in the same year, there is no diversification to soften the blow. A broad index fund spreads your money across thousands of companies at once. Putting your entire net worth into a single house is the kind of concentration nobody would ever recommend if it were a stock. We only accept it with homes because the story is so strong. And historically, over long stretches, the broad market has often grown faster than the typical single home. So here is the sharp version. Renting is only throwing money away if you spend the difference. If you invest it, renting can quietly build just as much wealth, sometimes more, with far more flexibility. But there is a catch, and it is the honest reason buying stays so popular. Most renters do not invest the difference. They spend it. Hold on to that, because it is the strongest point in favor of buying, and we are about to get to it. Because I am not here to tell you to never buy a house. Buying is genuinely the smarter move in a lot of situations, and pretending otherwise would just be a new myth to replace the old one. Buying tends to win when a few things line up. When the price-to-rent ratio in your area is low, so a home is actually cheap relative to renting. When you're going to stay put for a long time, well past that break-even point. And when you want stability, a place that is truly yours, that no landlord can sell out from under you or price you out of next year. That stability has real value, even though it never shows up on a spreadsheet. And here is the big one, the psychological one. A mortgage is forced savings. Every single payment, you are made to put a little into equity, whether you feel like it that month or not. For most people, the ones who would not actually invest the difference, that forced discipline is the real reason buying builds more wealth than renting. Not because renting is mathematically worse, but because owning quietly saves you from yourself. That is a genuine, honest advantage. If you know deep down that you will never invest the difference, then a house might be the single most reliable way you ever build wealth. Just walk in with your eyes open, knowing the true costs, not the fairy tale. But there is a trap hiding even inside the smart case for buying, and it has a name. It is called being house poor. It is when you technically own a home, but the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, and the endless repairs eat so much of your income that you have nothing left. No savings, no investing, no cushion. On paper, you look successful. You own a house. In reality, you are one broken furnace away from a credit card spiral, which is exactly the trap from the last video. A house only builds your wealth if you can still afford to live, save, and invest around it. The second the home owns you instead of the other way around, all those equity gains are trapped in a place you cannot eat, cannot spend, and cannot easily sell. So the rule is simple, and almost nobody follows it. Buy less house than the bank will approve you for. The bank hands you a maximum, the biggest loan they will give you. That number is calculated for the bank's safety, not for yours. The smart move is to stay well under it, so the home becomes one part of your financial life, instead of the thing that swallows it whole. So step all the way back and look at the whole thing. Renting is throwing money away. Buying builds wealth. Both of those are slogans, and both are sometimes true and sometimes completely wrong. The real answer was never renting versus buying. It was math versus a story. The story says grown-ups buy and renters waste. The math says it depends on your price to rent ratio, how long you will really stay, and what you do with the difference. Run those three, and you will often find that the responsible-looking choice, buying a house you cannot quite afford and might leave in 3 years, is the one quietly draining you. And the choice everyone silently judges, renting while you invest aggressively, is the one actually building your future. It is the same lesson as always on this channel. The most expensive mistakes almost never feel like mistakes. They feel like doing the normal, sensible, grown-up thing that everyone told you was smart. And that is the whole game. Not renting versus buying. Not responsible versus reckless. It is whether you make the decision with a calculator or with a feeling you inherited from people who never ran the numbers themselves. The people who quietly get wealthy through housing are almost never the ones who bought the biggest house they could. They are the ones who did the math, bought or rented accordingly, and then invested every dollar of the difference like their future depended on it. Because it does. So here is what to actually do, no matter which way you are leaning right now. Run the 3 numbers. Find the price to rent ratio where you live. Be brutally honest about how long you will really stay. And then, whichever path you choose, invest the difference. Because that is the part that genuinely builds wealth, house or no house. Do not buy a home just to prove you are a real adult. And do not drift and rent forever with no plan and call it freedom. Pick the option the math actually supports for your life, and then be relentless about that difference. Just to lock it in, the 3 numbers are these. The price to rent ratio, to see whether homes near you are cheap or expensive relative to renting. Your real-time horizon, to see if you will actually pass the break-even. And the difference, invested, because that is the engine that builds wealth either way. Miss those 3, and you are not really making a financial decision. You are just following a script someone else wrote for you. And one more thing, ignore the pressure. Ignore the relatives who ask when you are finally going to buy, as if renting were some kind of moral failing. It is not. A rented apartment with a growing investment account behind it beats an owned house that is quietly eating you alive every single time. The house was never the goal. Freedom is the goal, and there is more than one road there. If this changed how you see it, subscribe, because this entire channel is about replacing money stories with money math. And if you have not watched it yet, go see the video on the 5 money mistakes that keep you broke in your 20s. Renting a place you cannot afford and buying a house you cannot afford are really just 2 sides of the exact same trap. I will see you in that one. Take care.